My name is Kathleen Monroe. I'm 67 years old, a retired school librarian, a widow, and until recently, the kind of mother who would give everything and ask nothing in return. This morning, I put on my best dress. Not the new one. I couldn't afford a new one after paying $92,000 for my daughter's wedding. I wore the deep blue silk one my husband Mark bought me back in 1997. The one he said made my eyes look like home. I clipped on the pearl brooch he gave me for our anniversary, and I tucked a linen handkerchief, hand-embroidered just for Nora, into my purse. She doesn't know about the handkerchief. She won't. I was about to grab my car keys when my phone buzzed. A message from Nora, my only child. It read, "Mom, I think it's best if you don't come. Liam says your style and presence might make his family uncomfortable. Hope you understand." I read it again and again. Then I sat down. Not on the couch, on the floor. For 42 years, I have stood behind my daughter. In courtrooms, in hospitals, in school offices, in silence, in debt. I have stood when she couldn't. But this was not standing. This was erasure. 2 hours before the wedding, she told me I wasn't welcome. And not just that. I wasn't classy enough to sit with his family. I paid for her $92,000 wedding. She said, "Mom, you're not classy enough to sit with his family." I did not scream. I did not beg. I just stared at the message. And something inside me, something I hadn't touched in decades, shifted. I stood up, slowly. I picked up the envelope that held the final payment for the photographer, $12,000, due today. I looked at it like I would a match in a dry forest. I put it down. I walked into the bedroom and changed my shoes, from kitten heels to flats. My back ached, but not from age, from disbelief. I opened the drawer where I kept the old letters Mark used to write me from work. Tucked between them was a business card. Harriet Bell, attorney at law. She helped me settle Mark's estate after he passed. I slid the card into my purse. Then I made myself tea. Lavender. From the tin Nora brought back from her honeymoon planning trip to France. Ironically, a trip I paid for. My hands were shaking, but not from anger. From realization. I had raised a daughter who believed my presence was a burden, but my money was a given. I sat by the kitchen window and watched the sun hit the driveway. Guests would be arriving now. Laughter would be echoing under the tent I funded. My chair? Empty. By design. Somewhere in that echo, my name would be mentioned. Maybe with an excuse. Maybe not at all. But I knew what I had to do. I took one final sip of tea, reached for my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. It rang twice. Then I heard a familiar voice. "Kathleen? This is Harriet. Is everything okay?" And I said, in the calmest voice I'd ever used, "Hi, Harriet. I need your help. We're pulling every payment, all of them, today." Silence on the line, then a quiet, "Understood." I didn't go to the wedding, but I was still there, just not in the way they expected. I didn't always have $92,000, but I had savings. I had a pension. I had what was left of Mark's life insurance after the hospital bills. When Nora got engaged, she didn't ask if I could help. She simply sent me an itemized spreadsheet. Labeled wedding budget. Final. No greeting. No thank you. Just a list. $12,000 for venue deposit. $9,400 for floral design. $18,500 for catering. $5,000 for a DJ and string quartet. $3,800 for custom calligraphy invitations. line after line after line. At the bottom, it said, total due, $91,765. And next to it, thanks, Mom. I'll let you know if anything changes. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, my fingers hovering over the reply button. I didn't reply that night. But the next morning, I wired the first installment. I told myself, this is the last big thing you'll ever do for her. I told myself, it's tradition. Parents help with weddings. That's all this is. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't about tradition. It was about filling a silence that had been growing between us since Mark died. When she was little, she used to crawl into my lap and ask, Mommy, do you think I'll look pretty on my wedding day? I used to kiss her curls and say, you'll look like magic. This extravagant, sterile, perfectly lit wedding was supposed to be my gift of magic to her. And maybe, just maybe, a way to be close again. So I paid. Quietly. In full. I didn't argue when she swapped out the bakery I recommended for a French patisserie that charged double. I didn't push back when she said her dress consultant thought I should wear muted tones, so as not to draw attention. I didn't even flinch when she removed my name from the wedding program entirely. Mom, she said, it's just cleaner to keep it focused on me and Liam. No distractions. Distractions. That's what I'd become. Still, the week before the wedding, I picked out a navy dress and booked a hair appointment. I even sewed a tiny silver thread into the hem of her wedding gown. Just one stitch. Just mine. Just something that stayed with her that day, whether she knew or not. And even after the message she sent that morning, telling me to stay home, I still walked out the door. Not to crash the wedding, not to cause a scene. I just wanted to see it, to see what I paid for, to see the smile on her face, to witness the day I helped build from behind the curtain. I parked on the edge of the vineyard venue, watched as guests pulled up in sleek black cars, watched as servers carried crystal trays past towers of roses imported from Colombia, watched as a woman in heels and pearls checked names off a guest list I was never added to. And then I saw Nora. In her dress. My daughter. Smiling. Glowing. Effortless. She looked straight through me as if I were fog on a window. That's when I knew. This wedding wasn't for both of us. It never was. It was for her image, her reinvention, her curated version of family, where I was the backstage crew, not allowed into the frame. And even then, I didn't turn the car around. I waited. I watched. I listened. I held the envelope in my lap, the final payment for the photographer, marked, "Do not delay." Due today. And then I reached for my phone again. Harriet had already responded. On it. We'll pull the whole thing within the hour. I didn't go to the ceremony, but I sat in my car for 37 more minutes. I watched my daughter get married, through tinted glass, and finally understood what invisibility really meant. There was a time when I thought Nora just needed time to grow out of it. She was 17 when the changes began. Little things, at first. Eye rolls that lasted too long. Doors closed with just enough force to bruise the air. Skipped dinners, half-truths, a sharpness in her tone that wasn't there before. Then came Eric. Older, dangerous in a way that Nora romanticized. He wore a leather jacket in 90-degree heat and called me ma'am with a smirk that made my stomach twist. I tried to talk to her. She said, "You wouldn't get it, Mom. He listens to me, not like you." That was the first time she made me feel irrelevant. But it wouldn't be the last. 3 months later, I got a call from the school. Nora hadn't shown up in 2 weeks. She had dropped out without telling anyone. She said she was finding herself. I said nothing, but I drove to 3 different bookstores and bought every parenting book I could find with a chapter on when your child disappears behind their own shadow. She didn't come home that night, or the next. Eric had taken her to Oregon, some commune-style place near the coast. She called collect after 5 days. I need money. The van broke down. I wired her $500. I told her, come home. She hung up. A week later, a woman from the hospital called. Nora had been admitted with dehydration and a fractured wrist. She'd fallen, or been pushed, during an argument with Eric. I drove 8 hours straight to get her. She didn't say a word the entire ride back. But when we got home, I made soup, put on soft music, and sat on the couch with her old baby blanket folded beside me. She didn't touch it. She just slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke up, she asked, "Did you tell anyone?" I shook my head. She nodded. "Thanks." That was her thank you. It didn't stop there. Over the next few years, she'd bounce between dead-end jobs, toxic friendships, and credit cards she never paid off. Each time, I was the one behind the curtain, calling landlords to negotiate rent extensions, paying off overdrafts before collections called, replacing lost phones, lost dignity, lost direction. Once, she used my identity to apply for a private loan. I didn't even confront her. I just paid it, had the record sealed, and left the paperwork in her desk drawer with a note. Next time, ask me first. She never brought it up. I think deep down, she knew I wouldn't stop helping her, and maybe that was my mistake. But when you've buried a husband, you cling to the one living soul that shares your name like it's the only thread left in the world. She was chaos, but she was my chaos. I told myself she'd grow out of it, that one day the wildness would settle, that the late-night calls and financial rescues would turn into birthday brunches and surprise visits. But she never really came back. She just became better at packaging the storm. Smoother, prettier, more curated. And when Liam came along, with his polished shoes and family inheritance, Nora didn't need to change. She just needed to erase the parts of herself that didn't match him. And I was part of that past. The past she needed to forget. Not because I was a bad mother, but because I was the only one who remembered the truth. Most people think sacrifice looks dramatic. Loud arguments, desperate pleas, grand gestures. But in my life, sacrifice looked like quiet phone calls at 1 a.m. to freeze Nora's credit cards before they sank her further. Sacrifice looked like sitting in the car outside a courthouse, waiting to post bail for something I didn't even understand. Sacrifice looked like selling Mark's vintage record collection, the one thing of his I hadn't touched since he passed, just to cover Nora's emergency dental surgery. Not even for her, but for her roommate, who had no insurance. I paid for it, and never heard a thank you. That roommate's name was Jessa. She had a nose ring and dyed green hair. Called me Kath, like we were peers. Nora said they were soul sisters. Jessa totaled my car 3 months later while borrowing it, without asking. The insurance didn't cover the full cost. I didn't replace the car. I just adjusted my walking route to the grocery store. I've always believed if you raise a child in love, they'll come back to it eventually. But sometimes, love is a one-way inheritance. There was the $14,000 private loan Nora defaulted on in her name, but used my address. I got the collections notices. I paid it off in monthly chunks. I never brought it up. Then came the night in Santa Monica. She was detained after a noise complaint turned into a drug-related search. She wasn't using, but the apartment reeked of it. Police wanted to charge all present. I called a friend of a friend, defense attorney, and wired $3,000 for expedited release. She texted me the next day. "All good. Love you." 2 words. No, thank you. Not even a voice. Just pixels. I've read stories about parents who cut ties, who say, enough is enough. I used to wonder how they could walk away. Now I understand. It's not the money. It's not the sleepless nights. It's the emptiness that builds when the person you love stops recognizing you as a human being and starts treating you like a utility. Nora didn't hate me. She didn't love me either. She used me, softly, gradually, until the using felt normal, felt earned, felt expected. I remember once, after a particularly expensive month, 2 bounced checks, a missed bill, and a loan to cover Nora's boyfriend's car repair, I tried to bring it up gently. "Sweetheart, I need a little room to breathe this month." She blinked, confused. "Mom, you've always helped. That's what you do. You're the strong one." I laughed, and something in me cracked, because the strength she admired was the same strength she exploited. She respected my ability to bend, not realizing I'd stopped bending and had started breaking. I began writing it all down, not out of spite, out of necessity. A spreadsheet, years of payments, transfers, canceled vacations, pawned jewelry, deferred retirement. Mark would have done the same, I think, but he would have spoken up sooner. He had a way of saying no that sounded like wisdom, not rejection. Me? I said yes, until the meaning of the word faded. There was a journal I kept, hidden under a stack of photo albums. Each entry began with a number, the dollar amount of that month's invisible cost, and a line of what it replaced. $2,400 meant no heating upgrade that winter. $7,800 was the cruise Mark and I had promised each other for our 40th anniversary. $900 would have covered the back steps repair that I instead patched myself. Sacrifice isn't always bleeding for someone. Sometimes it's just never asking to be seen. And Nora, she never looked closely enough to notice I was disappearing. 6 months before the wedding, I got a message from Nora. Not a phone call, not even a voice note. Just a forwarded email with the subject line, "Updated wedding planning timeline, final draft." There were color codes, links, appointment times, and names I didn't recognize. A floral consultant named Margot, a stylist named Renee, an aesthetic advisor from San Diego. And in all 53 bullet points, not one mentioned me, except for a single line near the end. Financing to be handled by Mom. Confirm wire schedule. I read that line over and over, and I thought to myself, I've been reduced to a funding line in a spreadsheet. When I asked Nora if she wanted to go dress shopping together, she paused and said, "Oh, Renee already has fittings lined up, but I'll send you pictures." I said, "I'd love to be there." She smiled politely. "I know, Mom. But this is more of a modern process now. You'll love the result." Modern process. That's what she called something that intentionally excluded me. At first, I convinced myself it was just logistics. She was busy. I lived an hour away. So I tried showing up in other ways. I baked her favorite lemon cookies and mailed them in tins. No response. I sent a playlist of songs I thought she might like for the reception. Never acknowledged. I offered to help address invitations. She replied, "We've hired a calligraphy studio, but thank you." I asked, gently, if her father's photo would be on display at the wedding. Her answer? "Liam and I want it to feel forward-looking, not heavy." Heavy. That's what Mark's memory had become to her. I remember the day she chose the venue. She didn't invite me to see it. I saw it through a picture on her Instagram story. A sweeping vineyard estate with white pillars and chandeliers that looked like they'd judged better women than me. When I commented, "It looks beautiful," she replied with a thumbs up emoji. Not, "Thank you," not, "Wish you were here." Just that little sterile icon, like I was a stranger scrolling through the life of someone I used to know. One night, I gathered the courage to call her. I asked, "Sweetheart, do you want me to give a toast? I've been thinking about something to say." She was quiet for a beat. Then, "Oh, Liam's parents will be doing that. They're a bit traditional. We don't want too many voices." Too many voices. That's what I'd become. An extra sound in a production where I was once the entire stage crew. I started to notice the pattern. Every time I tried to be involved, not to control, not to meddle, just to love, I was met with polite dismissal. "Thanks, but no. Already handled. Not necessary." Always delivered with a smile that said, "Don't make this awkward." And I didn't, because I thought, maybe the best gift I can give her is space. Maybe all she wants is a silent supporter with a checkbook. So I played the role. I sent the deposits. I tracked the deadlines. I updated my calendar around their schedule. I said nothing until that message came, the one that said, "Mom, I think it's best if you don't come." And suddenly, all those silences I had offered became my prison. Because when you raise your voice after years of whispering, no one hears you. They just wonder why you're being difficult. I realized then, this wasn't my daughter's wedding. This was her rebranding. And I, apparently, didn't fit the image. I started embroidering the handkerchief 4 months before the wedding. It was a tradition in my family. My mother stitched one for me when I got married. White linen with a delicate K in sky blue thread at the corner. I still keep it tucked in my jewelry box, though it's yellowed with age now. She had said, "One day you'll pass this on." I never got to pass it on. Nora wanted everything new, so instead, I stitched her one from scratch. Every night after dinner, I'd sit in the quiet corner of my kitchen, the lamplight warm, the world silent, and work on that little square of fabric. It calmed my hands, gave me something to hold on to. The letters were soft at first, but grew firmer with time. N plus L, Everlight. A phrase she used once to describe Liam when they'd only been dating a month. "It feels like he's made of sunlight," she'd said then, leaning against my counter, peeling an apple like she used to as a kid. Her face was full of wonder. That version of her hadn't visited in a long while. I sewed the phrase with silver thread, then a small lavender vine along the edge, her favorite flower when she was a child. I wrapped it gently in soft tissue, placed it in a small white box, and tied it with a navy ribbon to match her dress code. I even added a handwritten note inside. "For tears of joy or strength, love always, Mom." I had planned to give it to her the morning of the ceremony, to place it gently in her palm, look her in the eye, and remind her, without words, that no matter the distance between us, I was still her mother. But the message came first. "Mom, I think it's best if you don't come. Liam just wants the day to be calm, seamless. It's not personal." And somehow that made it worse. I didn't cry. Not then. Not even when I stared at the blinking cursor beneath her message for 12 minutes, willing myself to feel something. But I felt hollow. Still, I got dressed that morning. Navy dress, modest heels, a simple updo. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I just wanted to be nearby, to be part of something I helped build. As I stepped into the garage, reaching for my clutch, my foot brushed against something under the old garden bench. A white box, ribbon slightly askew. I bent down, heart already tightening in my chest. It was the box, the one I had wrapped with careful fingers, sealed with a hope I couldn't name. Unopened, unmoved, forgotten. I slowly sat down on the edge of the bench, box in lap, and opened it. The tissue paper was still crisp, the note still folded. She hadn't even looked at it. I pressed the handkerchief to my chest. The thread was soft and cool. It smelled faintly of the lavender sachet I had tucked inside. And suddenly, that's when it hit me. Not in a loud, crashing way, but like a small rip in something sacred. She didn't forget it. She left it. This was not an accident of timing or a chaotic wedding morning. This was deliberate. A signal. A line drawn. You don't belong in this moment. In this version of my life. I sat there for a while, long enough for the sun to rise higher and cast new light through the cracked garage door. It streaked across the floor and over my shoes, like a spotlight on someone who hadn't realized they were still on stage. That handkerchief had taken me dozens of hours, but it wasn't the lost labor that hurt most. It was the realization that I'd spent all that time reaching towards someone who had stopped reaching back years ago. I didn't put the box back. I took it with me, placed it carefully in the passenger seat of my car, and buckled it in like something fragile and alive. And I drove to the venue anyway, not with hope, not even to make peace, but because I needed to see, with my own eyes, how far away my daughter had placed me, from the guest list, from the ceremony, from her heart. I wore the navy dress, the one I'd worn to Mark's memorial 6 years ago. I didn't choose it for nostalgia. I chose it because it fit, and because it reminded me I'd already survived one heartbreak. I could survive another. I pinned my mother's silver brooch near my collarbone, a small lily of the valley, tarnished around the edges. She had worn it to my graduation. I wore it to Nora's. We used to believe in the weight of traditions, in passing things down. I sat in the car outside the vineyard gates for 23 minutes before opening the door. Not because I was hesitating. No, I had made up my mind. I just wanted to arrive on my own terms, in my own time. The air smelled of roses and expensive grass. You can always tell when a place is more curated than lived in. The gravel path to the main house was lined with fairy lights, though the sun hadn't yet begun to set. There were voices ahead. Laughter. The clink of champagne glasses. Soft music that sounded like it had been selected by a wedding planner who charged by the hour. I walked slowly. My heels, only slightly scuffed, crunched the gravel in a rhythm I couldn't quiet. A man in a tight black suit at the door looked up from a clipboard. "Ma'am, name please?" I said nothing, just smiled politely and kept walking. He hesitated but didn't stop me. But someone else did. From behind the floral arch, she appeared. My daughter, Nora. Hair swept into a low bun, diamond studs in her ears, lips a shade too pale. Her dress was elegant, structured, ivory silk like it was pulled from a bridal magazine. She looked beautiful, almost unfamiliar. She stepped forward, fast. "Mom?" Her voice was hushed, but edged with warning. "What are you doing here?" I looked into her eyes. There was no joy in them, only panic, calculation, and something colder than I'd ever seen before. I held my clutch with both hands. I just came to wish you well. I won't stay. I promise, her jaw tightened. You weren't supposed to come. I know. Behind her, two bridesmaids peeked from behind the curtain of flowers. One of them, tall, red lipstick, the kind of confidence that feeds on gossip, whispered something and laughed. I looked back at Nora. I brought you something. I opened my clutch and held out the handkerchief, now slightly wrinkled from its journey. The embroidery glimmered faintly in the light. Just this. I made it for you. That's all. She didn't take it, didn't even glance at it. Her eyes moved to the brooch on my dress. Why are you wearing that? I blinked. It was my mother's. I thought, Mom, she interrupted, voice lower now. Please. Liam's family is already, they don't understand our history. They expect a certain tone today. You showing up like this? Uninvited? She stopped herself. Like this? I asked. In a dress you've seen before? Nora exhaled. This day isn't about the past. I'm trying to build something new. I stood there, still holding the handkerchief, which now felt absurdly fragile between us. I know, I said quietly. That's why I'm here, to let you know I'm walking away. But not because you told me to, because I finally see where I stand. She didn't reply. And that silence? That was the loudest confirmation I could have ever received. So I turned. No tears, no pleading, just footsteps retracing their way through the gravel, past the fairy lights, past the suit with the clipboard. I got into my car, placed the handkerchief back in the box, set it beside me like a passenger, and I whispered, not to Nora, not to the sky, but to myself. No one gets to erase me, not even the one I gave everything to. I didn't say another word, not when Nora crossed her arms and turned slightly, as if already dismissing the conversation. Not when the bridesmaids behind her smirked. Not when the man in the black suit at the gate eyed me like I was someone who had wandered in off the street. I just nodded once. Slow. Small. Like a curtain drawing closed on a performance I hadn't been invited to, even though I'd funded the entire stage. I turned. Gravel crunched beneath my heels. The box in my hand felt heavier than before. I held it close to my side, like something private. Not because it needed protection, but because I did. It wasn't just a handkerchief anymore. It was every birthday party I planned, every ER bill I covered, every court date I sat through alone. Every night I left the porch light on until 3 a.m., just hoping to hear the front door creak, all sewn into a piece of cloth that was never meant to be returned. I walked to my car slowly, not to stall, but to feel each step. The wind was picking up. The scent of roses and champagne drifted across the vineyard like something rehearsed. But underneath it, there was a bitterness, a cold I hadn't felt in years. I opened the door. Saturday placed the box on the passenger seat and closed the door as softly as I could. Still no tears. Still no shaking hands. Just a silence that wrapped itself around me like armor. I looked in the rearview mirror. The floral arch was already obscured by guests. Laughter returned. The machine of celebration didn't even pause to notice me missing. That was the thing, I realized. I was never meant to be seen, only used. My name wasn't printed on the programs. My speech wasn't on the agenda. My face didn't fit the aesthetic. But my credit card had been accepted. My savings had been transferred. My silence had been counted on. I thought of the last 6 months. The floral deposits. The cake tasting. She said I didn't need to attend. The $6,000 invoice for the dress alterations alone. The sudden $11,500 wire for venue expansion. Every dollar attached to my name. Every contract tied to my consent. And I had signed quietly, willingly, blindly, because I thought love was enough, because I believed that my presence didn't need to be negotiated. It was assumed. But I was wrong. They hadn't just planned a wedding without me. They had rewritten the family story and removed my name from the first chapter. And now, I had decisions to make. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine hummed like it understood the weight in my chest. As I drove down the long path out of the estate, I pulled over before reaching the main road, parked beneath a cypress tree where the vineyard fencing ended, and I pulled out my phone, not to call Nora. No, those calls were long gone. What I needed now wasn't reconciliation, it was clarity. I opened the folder in my notes app labeled Wedding Expenses. I scrolled through line by line, item, date, amount, recipient, everything meticulously logged. Then I opened my email, typed 3 short messages, each one to a different vendor, each one with the same subject line. Authorization withdrawal, Kathleen Monroe. And I scheduled them all for 6:15 p.m. The ceremony would begin at 6. By 6:30, they would know what silence really meant. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't trying to ruin her day. But I had spent a lifetime absorbing the cost of her choices, and just this once, I needed her to feel the weight of mine. I didn't rush home. I stopped at the gas station near Sycamore Hill and bought myself a bottle of lemon water and a pack of those oatmeal cookies I used to sneak into Nora's lunchbox when she was 9. Funny thing, those cookies still tasted like childhood, but they also tasted like something else now, like finality. I parked the car outside my house and sat for a moment. The sun had shifted just enough to cast long shadows across my driveway. My gardenias were blooming, the ones Mark and I planted the year Nora turned 3. I looked at the clock. 5:22 p.m. The ceremony would begin in 38 minutes. I picked up my phone. No hesitation. Contacts: H. Harriet Bennett, Law Office. The phone rang once, twice. Then that warm, clipped voice came through. "Kathleen, I was just about to call you." "Please don't," I said gently. "Not until we finish what we started." There was a pause. Then she understood. "You're sure?" "As sure as the day I came into your office with a folder marked wedding, a stomach full of doubt, and a daughter full of entitlement." Harriet sighed. "You always did know how to plan for both love and liability." I looked at the blue sky out my windshield. Cancel everything. Every authorization. Every standing agreement tied to my name. That includes the venue, the band, the honeymoon suite upgrade, the catering extension, and the bar tab buffer. And the dress? I nodded slowly, though she couldn't see it. Yes, she said she didn't want anything old. Well, that includes me. "Done," Harriet said, tapping her keyboard audibly. "I'll notify each vendor that your financial support has been rescinded due to a breach of personal terms." "Word it however you like," I replied, "as long as they understand this isn't about money. It's about acknowledgement." "You want a copy of the notice?" Number I wants silence. Let the shock do the talking. There was a small pause. Then Harriet asked, more softly, "How bad was it, Kathleen?" I looked at the little white box on my passenger seat, still unopened, still holding the handkerchief, still full of everything I had wanted to give. She told me to go away, that I wasn't invited. I stood at the entrance, and she looked me in the face and said it with eyes that didn't even flicker. Like I was a nuisance. Like I hadn't spent the last 3 decades catching her when no one else did. "I'm sorry. I'm not," I said, and meant it. Because today, I learned that being uninvited is sometimes the most freeing thing of all. "It's done, Kathleen. All payments flagged. You'll see reversal notices by Monday. Their side, likely immediate disruption." I exhaled. "And Harriet?" "Yes? Don't be gentle about it. Wouldn't dream of it." We both chuckled, an old habit from back when life was more courtroom than kitchen table. Before retirement, Harriet had represented survivors of emotional financial abuse. She knew the signs. She saw them in my folder that day, even if I hadn't. "Anything else?" "Yes," I said, glancing once more at the time. "Pour yourself something nice tonight. Because by 6:30, there's going to be fireworks in someone else's perfect little fairy tale." "Consider it done. Kathleen, I'm proud of you." That made my throat tighten more than Nora's dismissal ever could. "Thank you, Harriet, for reminding me that protecting myself is not betrayal." "No, sweetheart. It's justice." I ended the call and leaned back against the seat, letting the soft hum of my garden's wind chimes fill the space around me. It was the first time in years I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. Just then, my phone buzzed. Unknown caller, then another, Nora's name, then Liam's, then the venue, then blocked number. I silenced them all, let them ring into the air, unanswered. They could wait. Because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was reclaiming. At exactly 6:15 p.m., I poured myself a cup of Earl Grey. No sugar. Just a slice of lemon. That's how Mark used to like it. That's how I've learned to like it too. I set the cup down beside my old radio on the porch and sat in the creaky wicker chair that still bore the faint indent of Mark's shoulder. The gardenias were whispering in the breeze. The wind chimes played a tune even more honest than the string quartet I'd helped pay for. My phone was already vibrating when I picked it up. 4 missed calls. All unknown. I didn't answer. Instead, I scrolled through my email. One subject line after another, rolling in like waves breaking against a shoreline I no longer stood on. Subject: cancellation. Confirmation: Baldwin Floral Co. Ms. Monroe, per your legal revocation of sponsorship, delivery of bridal bouquets and centerpieces has been canceled immediately. We understand the urgency. Our team has withdrawn from the venue. Another. Subject: catering authorization removed. Tessa and Company, Cuisine. As per attorney instructions, we have halted all service mid-prep. Refund to your card is in process. We regret the disruption, but understand your decision. Then, subject: lighting and sound termination. Crystal Hue Events. Per Kathleen Monroe's directive and breach of client inclusion policy, we are removing all equipment from the premises. Please note your payment contract no longer obligates coverage for the event. I sip my tea, not out of smugness, not revenge, just presence. For the first time in months, I felt fully in my body. By 6:27, the string quartet I had quietly paid for, $4,500 plus gratuity, sent an automated confirmation. Musicians have been recalled. No charge applied. And by 6:30, a panicked text from Nora finally landed. "Mom, what is going on? They're saying everything's canceled. I'm walking down the aisle in 10 minutes. She followed up with, "Did you do this? Call me. Please. Now. Mom, this is not okay." I didn't respond. I simply placed the phone screen down beside my cup. I knew exactly what was happening, in what order. The photographers were likely now debating whether to even show up once they realized the bride's mother, also the primary financier, was no longer part of the picture, quite literally. The custom cake with the edible gold leaf? Withdrew service at 6:19 p.m. The invoice had stated, subject to family integrity clauses. I'd made sure that clause was in there when Harriet drafted the wedding sponsorship agreement 6 months ago. I may have seemed passive back then, but I wasn't naive. For every "you're just the mother," I had been quietly collecting receipts, not to weaponize them, but to be ready. Because a woman who spent her whole life absorbing consequences knows exactly how to manage her own exit. At 6:33, Liam's name appeared on my phone. I stared at it. His text came first. "Mrs. Monroe, we need to talk. We can fix this. Please." Fix what? Not my dignity. Not my role in this family. That they had chosen to remove without warning. I took another sip of tea and stood slowly, stretching my back. The sun was starting to set, casting long golden lines across the hardwood porch. I picked up the white box beside me, the one with the handkerchief, still unopened. I ran a finger over the ribbon. Then, without drama, I placed it back into my sewing chest, closed the lid. A soft thud, like the sound of a chapter closing. They say the storm didn't start with thunder. It began with silence. At exactly 6:31 p.m., the quartet stopped mid-song, halfway through Canon in D. A violinist looked toward the coordinator, puzzled. The guests looked around, some chuckling, thinking it was part of the performance. But then the flutist lowered her instrument. The sheet music was packed into a leather folio. The musicians gathered their cases. No bow, no thank you. Just quiet exit. A whisper spread down the aisle like spilled wine on linen. Did something happen? Is this part of the ceremony? Where's the mother of the bride? Inside the tent, waitstaff began to roll carts back into the catering trucks. Steaks half-seared were returned to crates. Shrimp cocktail platters were covered and stacked. The cake, 3 tiers of fondant and edible gold, was never unboxed. The delivery driver simply turned around at the front gate after receiving a call from his supervisor. Nora, at the altar, hadn't noticed yet. She stood beside Liam, clutching her bouquet of artificial florals hastily gathered from the table centerpieces. Baldwin Floral had packed up at 6:25 on the dot. The arrangements, along with the carefully placed flower wall that spelled "Forever Starts Now," were dismantled petal by petal. A few chairs away, the photographer was on his phone, frowning. He whispered to his assistant, who nodded once, then removed the memory card from his camera and slipped it into his jacket. "We're no longer under contract," he said flatly to the planner. "Please contact the client directly for any rescheduling." A hum of concern rolled through the crowd. The music was gone. The food vanished. Then the overhead lights flickered once and dimmed completely. The backup generators also contracted through me and revoked at 6:18 p.m. The wedding coordinator, dressed in her best professional beige, ran across the lawn with a headset clutched in her palm, desperately dialing numbers that were no longer taking calls. Vendors weren't answering. Emails bounced. Every confirmation turned into a ghost. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my porch, stirring lemon into my tea. Guests began to shuffle in their seats. Some stood, some whispered, some stared at the couple, beautiful, confused, standing beneath a half-lit arch of eucalyptus branches. Then Nora's phone buzzed. One glance, and her entire expression shattered. She turned sharply to Liam. She canceled everything. My mother. She did this. Gasps. Whispers. Liam stepped back, visibly sweating now, his hand running down the lapel of his rented tux. Wait, what? He stammered. Your mom? She funded this? She was supposed to stay quiet and just pay. That was the deal. The deal. Not love, not partnership, not family. A deal. The planner tried to step in. If we can just delay a bit, maybe half an hour, we can sort something out. But there was no DJ, no speakers. The AV company had unplugged everything and was halfway out the gates with their soundboards. Tables were being cleared before the dinner prayer. The bar had closed, its liquor license tied to a contract signed in my name. Every napkin embroidered with N+L 2025 was being folded and boxed. One guest whispered, "This wedding's collapsing like a soufflé in a thunderstorm." And in a way, it was. A beautifully planned illusion collapsing under the weight of its own entitlement. No tantrums. No screaming mother in the background. No public confrontation. Just absence. Just withdrawal. Just consequence. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. When you erase someone from your narrative, you better make sure you're not erasing the hand that held the pen. At 7:03 p.m., my phone had 32 missed calls. I didn't answer. I was slicing apples in the kitchen. Honeycrisp, my favorite. I'd planned to make a tart tonight, though, for who? I wasn't sure. Maybe just for me. Maybe for no one at all. The messages kept coming in. One from Nora, in all caps. "Mom, call me back, please, I'm begging you." Another from Liam. "Kathleen, we can fix this. Don't punish everyone for one moment." One moment? I chuckled softly. Some moments take years to arrive. This one had been growing for decades. Out at the wedding tent, though I wasn't there, I could almost see it unraveling, like a thread pulling loose from the hem of an expensive dress. Michael, Liam's father, wasn't a man who liked chaos. "What the hell is going on here?" he barked, already halfway out of his seat. "We just donated $20,000 to this. Are you telling me the wedding's falling apart? Because of your mother?" Nora, now flushed and visibly trembling, clutched her bouquet tighter, though there were no more photos being taken. She wasn't even supposed to come. She wasn't invited. She knew that. Michael's wife leaned in then, her pearl earrings swinging as she whispered, "She wasn't invited, but she paid for it?" "Well, I mean, yes. But that was the arrangement. She didn't mind. I thought—" Michael cut her off. "You thought you could cancel your own mother and keep her credit card active?" His voice was louder now, guests beginning to turn their heads. "That's not how people work. That's not how decent families operate, Nora." Liam stood beside her, visibly torn, his eyes scanning the empty dance floor, the unlit chandeliers, the caterers packing up in plain sight. "Wait," he said slowly. "You mean the venue, the food, even the tux rentals? They were all under your mom?" Nora's silence said more than words ever could. "Nora," he said, again, firmer this time. "What exactly did you pay for?" She blinked. Once? Twice. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. The mother-in-law, still polite in public but visibly uncomfortable, clutched her clutch tighter. "I assumed your side was handling most of the details. I didn't realize this was a one-sided contribution." Guests began to whisper again. Someone coughed. Someone else stood to leave. Liam rubbed his temples. "You told me she was toxic, that she didn't care, that she abandoned you when you were in college. She did, Nora snapped, voice high and desperate. She left me to deal with all that debt. But then she stopped, because in that moment, she remembered the letters her mom had quietly sent to the school board, the landlord who'd suddenly stopped asking for rent, the lawyer who helped expunge the record after that one awful night with Marcus and the pills. Her mother had never abandoned her. She'd simply stopped announcing her sacrifices. And now, standing in a collapsing wedding with wilted makeup and no music, Nora was finally seeing the outline of all the things she'd never thanked her for, and all the things she'd demanded as if owed. There was no one left to blame. Not Liam, not Michael, not the vendors, and certainly not Kathleen Monroe. The weight of that realization didn't come like a slap. It came like a slow tide, rising over her ankles, creeping toward her knees. And by the time it reached her throat, she knew. Her mother hadn't ruined her wedding. She had simply walked away. And with her went the foundation Nora had always assumed would stay, no matter how hard she stomped on it. It was nearly 9 p.m. when the phone rang again. This time, I let it ring twice before picking up. I didn't need to check the caller ID. I knew it would be her. I was sitting by the window, the tart I'd baked earlier, still untouched on the counter. The house smelled like cinnamon and quiet resolve. My hands were folded in my lap, the same way they used to rest when I sat in PTA meetings 25 years ago, listening to teachers gently hint that Nora needed structure. Now, all these years later, she finally called. And for once, she had no script. "Mom," she began, her voice a blend of anger and something softer beneath it. Panic, maybe. "How could you do that?" I didn't sigh. I didn't scold. I just responded, gently. "Nora, I didn't do anything. I simply stopped paying for my silence." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear her trying to make sense of that sentence. It wasn't what she'd expected. She wanted a fight, maybe, or guilt. She wanted me to grovel, to apologize for not enduring just one more humiliation. But I didn't. I waited. "You ruined my wedding," she snapped. But the words were shaky now. "People were talking. Liam's family thinks I'm a user, a liar." "I didn't ruin anything, sweetheart," I said, and the word sweetheart came naturally, not sarcastic, not cold. "I just canceled the things I paid for. The rest, that was yours to hold together." Another silence. "You didn't tell me you were going to do that," she muttered. "You didn't tell me I wasn't invited." She gasped, but didn't respond. I let the moment hang, let her sit in it. "You said I wasn't classy enough to sit with Liam's family," I continued, still calm, still even-toned. "And that was after I paid for the dress fittings, the catering, the backup lighting, the custom monogrammed linens, and a dozen other things you never once asked if I could afford." Her voice cracked. I didn't think it mattered to you." "That's the problem, Nora. You never thought it mattered because you assumed I had nothing else to live for. You assumed that motherhood meant servitude without boundaries. You assumed that my love would always mean sacrifice, even in silence." "I didn't mean—" "No," I cut in, still soft, but no longer yielding. "You didn't mean to hurt me, but you expected me to take it." She didn't speak again for a while. I heard a quiet breath, maybe a sniffle. Then, "Are you cutting me off?" There it was. The real fear. Not the canceled vendors, not the ruined evening, but the loss of a safety net that had always caught her, no matter how carelessly she jumped. "I'm not cutting you off," I replied. But I am stepping out of the role you cast me in, which was the mother who exists only in the background, the one who pays and disappears, the one who smiles when dismissed, the one who forgives without acknowledgement. That version of me, she's gone. Another silence. Then finally, almost a whisper, I think I've been a terrible daughter. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I let her sit in her words, let her hear them echo. I was young when I started raising you, I said instead. I didn't always get it right, but I never stopped trying. I wanted you to have everything I didn't. But maybe, in doing so, I forgot to show you the value of enough. She exhaled, long and unsteady. I don't know how to fix this. You start, I said, by not expecting someone else to clean up what you've broken. And then I added, when you're ready to be my daughter, not just my dependent, you know where to find me. I ended the call before she could say anything else. Not out of cruelty, but because for the first time in decades, I was choosing to speak only when I had something worth saying. And tonight, I'd said enough. I didn't need to check social media. The silence said enough. In the days that followed, my phone didn't ring again. Not from Nora, not from Liam, not even from one of those panicked bridesmaids who used to call me at midnight, asking if I could help fix the seating chart or wire an extra payment to the DJ. They were all quiet now. But I did hear from someone I hadn't expected. Michael. He found my landline number somehow, called on a Sunday morning while I was tending to my rose bushes, still in my gardening gloves. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. Kathleen, I just want to understand what happened. I wasn't aware you paid for everything. And I mean, everything. There was a long pause in his voice message, then a sharp breath, like a man trying not to choke on the realization. If I had known, we would have... Look, we're going over the financial disclosures. It doesn't match what Nora told us. It doesn't match what Liam thought. I wanted to say I'm sorry, and I wish we had asked more questions. But of course, they never asked, because they didn't need to. Because Nora had always looked confident, polished, capable. But now, the cracks had begun to show. After the wedding chaos, Liam's parents requested to see the original contracts, especially the venue deposit, the floral budget, the license agreements. They discovered most of the payments were made under my name, some by check, others by wiring transfer from a long-frozen account I reopened just for her. Why didn't she pay with her own account? Michael reportedly asked. Nora's answer? It was easier that way. My mom insisted. But I didn't. And Liam knew it. He began digging. Quietly at first. He found Nora's personal credit score had dropped below 600. He found she had maxed out 2 cards before the wedding planning even began, buying luxury dresses, makeup tutorials, influencer branding sessions. And perhaps the cruelest twist of all, she had taken out a loan in my name, forged signature and all, to cover a pre-wedding spa retreat with her friends. When Liam found that out, something in him fractured. You lied to me, he reportedly told her. About everything. About your finances. About your mother. About who you really are. I just wanted a perfect day, she sobbed. But you built it on someone else's back, he said, and then shoved her out the door. One by one, people began to step back. Not in anger, not in cruelty, but in recognition. Recognition that love without truth is just decoration. And once the lights go out, all that's left is the structure underneath. And Nora's structure, hollow, carefully manicured but unsupported. Her mother-in-law quietly removed her from the family's charity board. The stylist who had offered to sponsor her honeymoon wardrobe canceled collaboration. The vendor community flagged her as high-risk client across their private networks. I didn't watch her fall, but I heard the echoes, and they didn't sound like punishment. They sounded like accountability. It wasn't my doing. I hadn't called a single person. I hadn't written a post. I hadn't warned anyone. I had simply stepped aside. And when someone you depend on to clean your mess finally walks away, you realize how much of your image depended on someone else's silence. The last I heard, Liam had moved back into his parents' home for clarity. The marriage license hadn't even been submitted yet. Nora? She was left sitting in the apartment I had leased in my name 6 months ago, now facing questions she had never had to answer before. Not about the wedding, not about the money, but about herself. The light that afternoon was gentle, not golden, not glowing, just quiet. I sat on the front porch, the same way I had so many evenings before, only this time with no wedding to rush toward, no florist to confirm, no daughter waiting to call for help last minute. Just the creak of the old swing, the soft chime of my spoon against porcelain, and the slow swirl of honey dissolving into my cup of Earl Grey. I had turned off my phone that morning, not because I feared her voice, but because I didn't need noise anymore. Peace, it turns out, doesn't arrive like a grand parade. It slips in slowly, like steam from a kettle. I took a sip, closed my eyes, and let the warmth fill the space she used to occupy inside me. Not as a child I had to fix, but as a person I had finally released. After a few minutes, I stood up and walked back inside. My house was clean, not in the tidy way people mean when they apologize for mess, but in that spiritual, uncluttered way that comes after you finally told the truth, even if only to yourself. I opened the hallway closet, pulled down the shoebox I hadn't touched in years. Inside were small things: a crayon drawing labeled "My Mommy is My Hero," an old movie stub from a Disney film we saw when she was 7, a photo of her holding my face in both hands on her 10th birthday. I added something new to the box that day: the handkerchief. Delicately stitched, white cotton, with pale blue thread curling her initials into one corner: Nora Mae Monroe. It had taken me hours, but love doesn't count time. She never saw it, at least not truly. I had found it still in its silk-lined box, shoved in a paper bag, tossed in the garage. Beside it, the RSVP list I'd helped organize. My copy, the one she never asked for again. I wrapped the handkerchief in tissue, placed it in the box with the others, and for the first time, closed the lid without tears. There's a strange ache that comes when you realize someone you love never really looked at you, only through you, for what you could offer. But that ache dulls when you stop offering and start becoming whole again. I didn't write her a letter, didn't leave a note. I simply labeled the box. Things I gave with both hands. And I slid it back onto the shelf. Outside, the wind had picked up slightly, stirring the dried lavender I planted last spring. I poured myself another cup of tea. No one else would be joining me, but it didn't feel empty. For the first time in a long time, my own company felt complete. They say healing is loud, but I don't believe them. Mine came quietly, with a tattered box, a cooling cup, and the sound of nothing falling apart anymore. I didn't change the locks. I didn't block her number. I didn't burn the old photos or delete her from my will. or write a post online demanding justice. No, I just chose not to wait anymore. Not for an apology, not for recognition, not for the moment when she would finally say, "Mom, I see you." Because I saw myself, finally, and that was enough. The next morning, I woke early, made a simple breakfast, toast with almond butter, a sliced pear, and the last cup of the tea I'd brewed the night before. No ceremony, no lingering sadness, just calm. I sat at the kitchen table with the morning light warming the worn wood surface, and I opened a notebook I hadn't touched since my husband passed. It was empty, clean pages, waiting. I began to write. Not a letter, not a journal, but a plan. For me, not for Nora, not for anyone else. I wrote 3 words at the top of the page. Next 10 years. I smiled. It wasn't a sarcastic smile. It was the kind you make when you surprise yourself, like catching your own reflection in a mirror and thinking, "You're still here." I started small. Take a watercolor class, visit the lighthouse in Oregon, read all the books I never finished, host a garden tea for the neighbors, volunteer twice a month, make lavender soap. None of these goals needed her approval. None of them required a thank you. None of them depended on whether or not I'd earned my place at anyone's table, because I was building my own. Later that day, I took a walk down to the lake. The same lake where I used to bring Nora when she was small. We'd skip stones. She'd laugh when they sank. I'd pretend they were wishes. I sat on the bench, wrapped in my old shawl, and watched the wind play with the surface of the water. It looked like it was breathing. I thought about all the years I had given away, and how I had confused giving with losing. But not anymore. Giving is a choice. Losing is forgetting you had a choice. I still loved my daughter. But love doesn't mean endurance without boundaries. It doesn't mean paying with silence or standing outside your own life so someone else can live more comfortably inside theirs. I could still love her without funding her, without erasing myself for her comfort, without waiting at doors that would never open again. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't revenge. It was release. On the walk back, I passed the local bookstore. A help wanted sign hung in the window. Part-time, community events, book club organizer. I walked in. The woman behind the counter looked up. "Can I help you?" I smiled. "Actually, I think I can help you." We talked for an hour. She asked if I'd be willing to help with their senior storytelling nights. Said they needed someone who understood memory, loss, and beginnings. I laughed, not loudly, just a breath of laughter from deep in the ribs. "I think I'm exactly who you're looking for," I said, and I meant it. When I returned home that evening, the sun had started to dip. I lit a candle, not because the room was dark, but because I wanted to see what it felt like to light something just for me. It flickered gently on the counter, soft, like forgiveness without an audience. That night, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder if she'd call. I didn't reread old messages or try to interpret silences. I went to bed early, slept soundly, dreamt of water and stones that skipped far into the horizon. And when I woke up, the only thing waiting was my own life. And this time, I chose it.